Hello, this is the next in a series of short business research methods videos, meant for business students in higher education. Now, Harvard referencing style is not the only referencing style that is used in business education. There are many others. But Harvard gives us a very useful example on which to base our understanding of referencing. Referencing is critically important, mainly because if you get it wrong, you can lose marks if you're a student. But more than that, you're actually stealing somebody's ideas. So let's have a look at academic referencing. Why and how? Why do you need to cite or reference the work of other people in your literature review, and indeed in any academic business writing? Well, for a start, it avoids plagiarism, and plagiarism, which is the knowing use of somebody else's ideas without saying where you got them. That's academic crime, in the sense that people for generations and generations have worked hard to research and develop knowledge. In fact, that's one of the purposes of the Academy, to develop original knowledge. If you'd spent your entire lifetime developing a body of knowledge, you'd not be too pleased if someone just took your ideas and didn't say where they got them. So we have to try to avoid plagiarism, and different educational institutions have different remedies for this. Most universities and colleges these days use automatic software where all coursework is automatically submitted, and we can immediately see where sets of words and ideas have come from. If they are correctly referenced, then that's fine, no problem at all. Although it is a good reason not to do too much quotation, because otherwise great big chunks will come up as other people's work, and you don't get marks for other people's work in your own assignments. So we want to properly acknowledge other people's work, and the whole idea behind the use of Harvard-style referencing is to ensure that anyone who wants to look up your reference can find it really easily. Some other reference styles use footnotes, or they actually put references in order in which they come up in a particular chapter or piece of work. The point of the Harvard style is that it's always listed under a reference list at the end, in alphabetical order of author surname. So it's terribly quick to look up. If you find anything at all in the text, you want to check the source, turn to the back, and you can immediately find in the alphabetical order exactly where that idea came from. 3 easy steps then for Harvard referencing style. The first step has to be good housekeeping, I'm afraid, and that's not something most of us find easy. Whenever you find any kind of source, any kind of reference of literature for your academic work, you should keep a detailed note of it. And I don't just mean the title. I mean all the bibliographic details which allow us to find it again. That's the point. And if you want to if some students are in the habit of cutting and pasting particularly useful sections of online sources into perhaps a Word document for future reference, not intending to plagiarize, but trying to pull all the ideas together. And that's fine, but you must always keep a detailed bibliographic note and a page number from where you found it, and preferably the URL if it's online. That way, you're never going to lose the reference. Believe me, you can spend hours at the end, just before a deadline, trying to find stuff if you didn't make a note of it. So the general idea is, if you're doing a substantial piece of business research, you keep a logbook. You can keep it online, or you can keep it in a notebook, whichever you prefer. But always write down your keywords for literature search and a detailed note of all your sources. Then you're going to need to quote sources correctly in the main body of any assignment. Now, any particular institution will have guidance on this, so use your institution's guidance book on how to quote. In some institutions they use Harvard style, but not exactly as Harvard use it. So always check that it's exactly right. And provide details of all sources referred to in your assignment in the references list at the end. Just a quick point, there is a difference between a reference list and a bibliography. A bibliography is everything you've read, but a reference list is an alphabetical by author surname list of everything mentioned in the text. In most academic assignments in higher education, we're not so much interested in the bibliography, we're more interested in the reference list. If we're going to reference a textbook, or any sort of book, come to that, then here's the kind of information you're going to need to record in that logbook. Really important to have all these things. Where would you find them? Well, the name of the author usually isn't too hard in a book. The year the book was published will be just inside the front cover, the title will be on the front, the edition will be just inside the front cover, and somewhere just inside the front cover will be the name of the publisher and the city where they're based. So not too difficult for books. What about company reports? Maybe found online, no particular author. Then in this case, you need a corporate author. Work it out for yourself. It's probably the organisation's name, unless there's a particular department or unit that's produced the report. You'll usually find that either at the very beginning or the very end of the company report. Again, you need the year of publication, which should be there, the report title, and the place and publisher, and it may be that the publisher is that corporation again. What about academic journal papers? Slightly more complicated, and here's the information you need. You need the name of the author, again, and hugely important that you always list the surname first. You need the year of publication, the title of the article, and then the title of the journal, and it is the title of journal which is usually italicized or bolded in your reference list. For a journal, you also need the volume and issue number. Volumes are usually, although not always, covering a whole year, and the issue number tells you which issue within that volume over that year or 2-year period. Also, you need the page numbers of the article, and this might be numbers in their hundreds, 333 to 402. Really important you get this right, because we are trying to be able to audit trace what you have used in your own writing. That's important. Now, not everything is as simple as books and journals. Websites are particularly difficult. Electronic sources are quite hard because the obvious bibliographic data is not sitting on a front cover page. We might have a named author, or you might need to work out a corporate author, like the organisation publishing the site. The date published, if there is one, there isn't always on an electronic source. And ideally the title of the website page you're looking at, or if no title, then a relevant subject for that page. Then type of source, usually in square brackets, although some institutions have slightly different approaches to this. And then the URL, or the unique web address. And very importantly, the access date. That's the date you found this. You can see why it's important to actually write that down, or if you're printing it off from an online source, then usually your access date will be printed automatically, but not always. Do check. If you're using a search engine like Google or an academic database like Emerald or Business Source Premier, these are not valid sources for reference. This is where you need to go. So just to summarise then, it's really important to reference because we have to acknowledge where ideas come from. Plagiarism is punishable. And the usual punishment in an academic institution is to reduce the marks to 0. So even if you've done a huge amount of work, you're going to get nothing for it. That's not worth risking. Really important to use authors in the text. So we've covered reference lists at the end of your work, but of course in the text itself you will need to make references. You don't put the whole thing in. In fact, one of the biggest errors is to have a whole website reference within the text. That really makes the whole text unwieldy and difficult to read. So try and find the author, and if it's a corporate author, use that. Put it in brackets with a comma and then the year of publication, close brackets. You might have several, and your own higher education institution guidance will tell you how it likes you to do that. There are particular ways of doing it. Usually we list in order of date of publication within the bracket if there are 3 or 4 different sources for the idea you've been discussing. Use of double quotes when a word or sentence or phrase is taken directly from somewhere else. This is important. If you are going to quote, try not to. Do it as little as possible, but where it's really important because someone's saying something really relevant to what you want to say, use a double quote, give the reference, but also give a page reference. That's important. The omission of page numbers for quotations is very common. Sometimes it's difficult. If it's an online source, yeah, you might not have a page reference. But if, for example, you're reading an academic journal online, they should show you the page numbers in the actual journal. Just while we're on that subject, if you read an academic journal online because your institution has a subscription, you don't list it as an online source. You list it as a print publication because it is. You've simply accessed it online. So list the normal journal requirements if you know it's also a print journal. The only time that doesn't apply is where your journal is fully electronic and there is no print version. List all your reference sources in your reference list at the end of the essay. Just get into the habit of, as you're writing, every time you cite somebody, just keep that growing list of references at the bottom. Don't leave it till later. It will be harder then. But don't list sources that you haven't used. You read them, but you didn't actually use them unless you're specifically asked for a bibliography. Format of referencing talked about in this video follows broadly Harvard referencing style, but there are different versions, so you might need to get hold of your own institution's specific referencing handbook. Happy referencing!